14, and none of my siblings had been back in this house. So like as I'm hearing that my film has gotten on the Sundance, all of my siblings walk in the door, and so they're already crying, and then I start crying, and they thought I was crying just because they were there. And then my fiance was like, no, 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 you don't understand. So then I told them, and it was a really cool moment.
Oh, that is an amazing story.
Yeah.
It's like a real watershed too. Sounds like that's one of those corners that you just turned and have never looked back.
Yeah, no, you can't. You just hit the ground running. Because then after that, it was like, okay, you got 5 weeks to raise $30,000. Try to figure out how you're going to get this movie that's been 4 years in the making, like totally completed, and try to get like the 30-something people that were part of the movie to Sundance, which costs like $500 a night to stay at. So the next 6 weeks or so were kind of hellish for me, even though it was like the biggest dream come true, but it was like you're kind of thrown into this pool of sharks and like swim very fast. And so I mostly held it together, and lots of people came back. Like our producers were really amazing. Terry Saris, Shoshana Huran, Claudette Stern, a lot of people who had started working on the film 5 years prior who now had new jobs, and they all just came back and they just became a part of the film again. And our actors, Julian Gant, our lead, and Sabrina Quinn, like lots of people just came, everybody came back out. We had 35 people at our premiere, and we were the film with the most people, even though we were the lowest budget movie at the festival. Yeah,
that's great.
It was really cool.
I love that.
We had a huge entourage, let's just say.
That's so cool. Well, it speaks to the family feeling, you know, of what you guys were doing. Yeah,
especially because we were in 2 condos. There were about 14 people in 2 3-bedroom condos.
Really?
It was just like, bring the sleeping bag. But it worked out. It was an amazing experience.
Well, and the film itself is a story. It's got, you know, it's beautiful, but the how you produced it is equally interesting story. It's fascinating in its own right. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the whole way you went about doing this, you know, how long it took, who was involved, how you funded it, etc.
Well, we wanted to bring back to life an older style of filmmaking. So I had been really impacted in film school by something called third cinema, and also Italian neorealism, which was done like after World War II. And basically they would use film as sort of a political tool to make a statement. And then they would include real people into the film so that you couldn't sort of separate reality from fiction. And so it kind of, in places especially where there wasn't freedom of speech or people weren't often, their voice wasn't heard, it was a way for them to tell a story and like force people to deal with or address different issues. And so Luis Buñuel did stuff in South America, this film called Los Olvidados, and then The Bicycle Thief, which is one of my favorite films by De Sica in Italy. And then, and so we were like, okay, we're gonna modernize this for Detroit. And so we worked with high school students. I started a youth program. We partner high school students with college students. They learn together for about 6 weeks about every aspect of filmmaking, and then at the end of it, they get to work on the movie. But in order to fund it, because we had no money for the class, for the youth program, or for the movie, we would make the author create these sort of win-win-win scenarios. So for example, I taught all of my students how to give a business pitch. That was one of their assignments. So then they had to go to restaurants in Ann Arbor and Detroit, give their 30-second business pitch to try to get food donated for the movie. And so we ended up getting like $12,000 worth of food donated that covered 3 weeks of our shoot because we couldn't have paid for it otherwise. So, and then we worked with this radio station, WJOB in Detroit. And then they would bring our students on every week to do like a kids on the radio kind of thing, and they would talk about working on the movie and stuff like that. But then we would use that as an opportunity to plug the restaurants who were donating things for us and ask for extras and random things like we need a coffin. Like there are lots of things that come up in a movie that you would never think about, and so we needed a coffin for a scene, and we're calling funeral homes like, can we borrow one for a day? And they're like, you can't borrow a coffin, you have to buy it or somebody has to be in it. We're like, we just want to put somebody in it and then we'll give it back to you. And they're like, no, you can't do that. But we ended up finding somebody's uncle.
I think it's so later to discount a used coffin.
Yeah, but then hopefully I won't get him in any trouble. But our motto is basically everybody was a producer. So for that situation, it turned out the girl who did makeup, who's from Midland, I think, her dad's friend had a funeral home, and he's like, sure, I'll drive down, you know, with a coffin, and then you can use it for a day, then I'll drive back.
Sweet.
And so then people in like Bay City really helped us a lot. We needed it for like a jail scene, and lots of people in the community came out. And so it's a really great model for filmmaking because it engages people while you're telling the story, but then once you're done, it actually creates a sort of large family of people who all feel a sense of ownership. Like they know that that movie wouldn't exist if not for their contribution. So then they're willing to help you get it out in different ways as well.
Yeah, so it's one thing to direct a film when you've got a budget and it's been given to you and it's not your money really, it's somebody else's. And in this case, you guys did all your own fundraising and you got all this buy-in from other people. How do you think that impacted your directing and or editing experience?
Well, it totally became something, like we had to serve the people and we had a responsibility. And so it took on a life of its own, actually. We shot on film. I'm kind of a film brat. We shot 16 millimeter, and we put all of our money into shooting, and we didn't have any to get the film done. So it actually took us 8 months before we saw anything that we had shot. So as a filmmaker, you can imagine you're kind of going crazy by that point. And so then a year later, once we actually got our footage back and did a rough cut, we realized we needed to reshoot. And so there was this sense of like, it wasn't even just me as a director making a creative decision. It was like I had a responsibility to all these people who were a part of this process to tell a story that they could be proud of and to do something that would be worthy of the contributions that they had made. And so, so our editing process actually became, I would screen the rough cut and just give up ownership as a director and say, here's our rough scenes, what do you think? And then people would be like, I don't like that, that's stupid, like this doesn't make sense. And I kept changing it. So right now the film has animation in it and voiceover. That didn't come, the animation came 3 years after we originally shot the film. The voiceover came a year after. We did 4 rounds of reshoots over the course of 3 years. And it was all in response. People would be like, I don't understand this part. Or they would say, like we screened at, actually the last line of the film came from a teacher at Ann Arbor at Huron High. And she was like, I love the movie, but there's this thing that bothers me. And she articulated this sort of socioeconomic thing. And I was like, that's a really good point. And then I wrote a line to respond to her making that comment. And then that ended up being the last line that went into the movie,
This is an incredible thing you have done. I mean, in so many ways. Would you recommend that another young filmmaker do it the same way?
It's tough.
It's tough,
I wouldn't wish it on. Anybody. Because I mean, it took 4 years, and it took just this sort of blind hope. Like I wrote one of those, like, you know how you make a dream board? I made this like cheesy dream board, and it said I wanted to get to Sundance, and and every student in film school wants to get to Sundance. But yeah, we made it, and we said, okay, we're gonna do this movie. We're gonna, and if we build it, they will come. That's what we would always say. And then it takes a lot of persistence to get to that point. I don't think I could do it again. It takes this sort of naivete and just kind of like do or die, like I'm gonna make it or bust kind of. And then thankfully we made it. And so yeah, it was a crazy experience. But I think it does a lot of justice to the story that you're trying to tell. So if a story is worth it, then I think you can sustain that lifestyle to get it done.
Well, it's definitely worth it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So you did pretty much everything with this film from the bottom up, and including your approach to distribution. Can you tell us a little about your Take a Stand tour? Yeah,
so we decided with the film, we had originally contacted a lot of distributors, Lionsgate and Sony and all these people, and even though people were saying they loved the film, they just didn't think it could do well theatrically. So then we decided we were just going to do it ourselves, and so we started partnering with high schools and colleges and independent theaters around the country, and then basically working with them to just set up our own screenings. And it's been going really well. I leave tomorrow for a 2-week tour from LA to Rhode Island to Baltimore to Ohio State to Toledo, just all over the place. And yeah, and then we also wanted to do something that would engage people and kind of give them a voice. And so students, we work with a lot of students, and they can make videos, they upload their videos. As I go to different cities, people tell me how they have taken a stand in their lives, and then we make little videos about that and then upload them online. And because I think everybody has a story, you know, and there's so many amazing things that people do every day, but in our society the media kind of chooses to focus on, you know, if it bleeds it reads, you know, and that's kind of what we got. Like even people would say, distributors, oh, I love the movie, but like there's no sex scenes, or there's no explosions, or there's no this, or there's no that.
you just throw in an exploding
well,
sex scene?
We actually shot a robbery scene. A guy gets held at knife point at some point because everybody kept being like, you can't tell a story in Detroit. And I had been opposed to it, and then we shot the scene, and afterwards I hated it, and we took it out. But it's like, it's really tough when you want to tell a certain story with certain values, you know, when that's not what the public is used to getting. And so you really have to fight to get that story out there, because I think the media can paint such a sort of morbid picture of what's happening in the world, and it's like there's beautiful positive things that happen every day. They get no attention because somebody down the street gets shot, you know, and you'll never hear about the kid that, you know, overcame these obstacles to get to college, or the mom that survived breast cancer, you know, because somebody robbed this or somebody broke into that, you know, whatever. And so so we really wanted to take a stand and get our film out there and try to send a positive message.
I love that. I think that's great. So in your film, Bilal, the main character, is faced with the challenge of maintaining his faith at work and at school. What challenges did you have as a Muslim to maintain your own faith in this extraordinarily challenging process?
Yeah, just to keep going. Like, people always ask me, how did I sustain that? And I'm like, I quit lots of times, but I would always sort of start back up if I felt like the signs were right, you know, and I kind of believe everything happens for a reason. And so I would always meet some person or have some experience, and it would just be like, just keep going and you'll get there. And then also, like, just in terms of, like I said, the values, like, it's really tough. Like, I was at Sundance, for example, and then we went to a bunch of other film festivals. We went to 23 film festivals last year. And then majority of the films, if they're indie films, have, you know, nudity. I think we did a count at Seattle, and we were like 85% of the films had a nude scene in the first 10 minutes, or like there was some type of sex something going on. And it's just like, that's what people need to be titillated enough to get interested in something. And then as a Muslim storyteller, like, you don't want to have to resort to those sort of lower senses sort of to be able to tell a story. You wanted to do something, not necessarily that you can't do something highbrow, but just without having to go to that place. And it's really tough because it's like you're working against what the industry is constantly trying to push out, and in some senses what the only thing that they know how to push out. And I think that's one of the most challenging things, is developing these sort of standards for yourself and trying to hold yourself to those standards, even if it makes your job harder as a writer or as a director.
That's really impressive. I appreciate that. So we've got another film that you worked on as associate producer called Mooz-lum. But what's next for you?
Well, the film Mooz-lum actually released today in 10 cities around the country: Detroit, San Francisco, New York, Atlanta. And so it's actually a new hybrid distribution model, and so we're hoping that people show up to see that one in the AMC theaters that it's being released in. And then we're also gearing up for another project. So we're planning to shoot another feature film this summer that deals with sort of healthcare issues and young people living with disabilities, and sort of the question of how do you approach living when you know you're going to die, which is kind of a trick question because everybody's going to die. So it really is sort of, how do you live in the moment and how do you make the most of each day. And then I'm also on tour with Bilal, the film. We're screening it at high schools, colleges, and independent theaters around the country. And so we go around and we screen the film. We actually developed a whole curriculum packet that goes along with the film, and so teachers can make assignments about it, essay questions, and all those elements are a part of that whole project.
That is really, really cool.
Thank you.
I want to thank you so much, Sultan Sharrief, for being here tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right. And I want to thank you, Ann Arbor, for joining us. Remember to tune in the second and fourth Tuesday of each month at 10:30 p.m. or look for rebroadcasts of Jeannie on the Beat at various times throughout the week. Ciao, Ann Arbor. I did exactly.
All this beauty, you might have to close your eyes and slowly open wide. All this beauty, we traveled all night, we drank the ocean dry and watched the sunrise. You can ask her about